Well, Greg Nicotero, thank you so much for joining me for this chat. Why was season 3 the time to go a little bit more relevant? In the first episode, it's not beating you over the head, but you're talking about militias and division. You're talking about celebrity culture and sort of a hive mind of fandom, literally, perhaps. Why did you kind of go in that direction, make it a little bit more timely and relevant?
Well, we had episodes in the past that also were had some underlying themes that were socially relevant. I mean, I feel like the horror genre is probably the easiest way to actually put forth social commentary that doesn't feel preachy because you're serving it up in a way that people find more palatable. They want to be scared, they want to be entertained, they want to have fun, and if there is an opportunity for you to put a perspective in there, you probably have a better time doing it in a genre piece of material than you do watching the news. So this season, there's a lot of episodes. We had one episode that I wrote the story for in season 1 with Trisha Helfer, Lydia Lane's story, which was about a female executive who, even though she's breaking the glass ceiling, she ends up turning on her partner. I thought that was an interesting story to tell. I feel like with this particular season, there are a couple stories. There's a story called Drug Traffic, written by Maddie Doe and Chris Larson, that I directed, that talks about healthcare. It talks about the fact that the government has failed people and they have to go across the border to get medication. And this young girl suffers from this ailment and she can't get treated because the government isn't taking care of her. So I do feel that there is an opportunity in Creepshow to tell stories like that. And I enjoy doing it because, I have a little bit of a responsibility.
The Mums, written by you, adapted by a story by Joe Hill. First off, did you and Joe work together on this at all, or did you just kind of grab the story and then he let you run with it?
Joe really trusts me a lot, and I'm pretty delighted about that. When we had developed Twittering from the Circus of the Dead for the animated story, I had hired a woman named Melanie Dale to write that and adapt it. And Joe told me he thought it was the best adaptation of his material that he had ever seen. So I was really excited about that. And there was another story that Joe had that we were interested in doing as well. But Mums really sort of spoke to me in terms of not only the codependence element of it, not only the mystery element of it, not only the sort of militia element of it. There's a lot going on in there. And Rusty did a great job directing, and Ethan Embry, who's an old pal of mine, agreed to come in and do it. So I felt like everything really lined up well on that episode.
Well, lined up well in sort of a surreal way too. Did that story Mums kind of hit a little bit different? Because you filmed it before the last year's January 6th insurrection. Does it hit a little bit differently a little now that you see it on screen in 2021 after January 6th?
I guess we were a little ahead of our time in terms of the relevance of that sort of subculture, and the fact that the portrayal of Hank, we made him a very unique villain. There's not much redeemable about him. And I thought that really the whole story is the little boys. So to make him the villain that we did, I think is what that story required. So
Yeah.
he was a little more arch and over the top than an everyday than an everyday type villain.
And Queen Bee also, the second story in the first episode, directed by you. I find it to be a really on point commentary on some elements of fan culture, and yet the thing that I really want to talk to you about is really the creature effects on it, because it's, you know, it's a loving homage and yet wholly unique to homage to Carpenter. So just a little bit about that. What can you tell us about those? How much of that was a practical effect?
It was all practical. The creature itself, all of the wide shots of the creature were a 1/3 scale miniature that we built. So when I shot the episode, I shot we shot a couple of green screen plates for the backgrounds, but most of it was we took photos of the hospital room set, and my studio in Los Angeles built a 1/3 scale miniature. And I knew that the creature itself, you know, I loved The Thing, and I love everything about that episode. It's a little bit Halloween too. It's a little bit The Thing. You know, there's a lot of John Carpenter in that episode. I'm very, very inspired by John's work. So I wanted the creature to be able to touch the ceiling. I wanted the legs to be up on the roof, kind of like the Norris transformation. So the only way to really do that on the minuscule budget that we had was to build a puppet, and we operated the puppet. We did a little miniature shoot at K&B after we had wrapped, even so much as we 3D printed a miniature gurney, and we used a little Brian De Palma trick where the creature knocks the gurney over and the gurney falls in the foreground, so your eye goes to the gurney falling to reveal the monster. And we shot that at a different frame rate, but I really loved designing those effects, and it really means the world to me that so many people have responded so much to the effects in that particular episode. Because when we were shooting it, all the creature stuff, everyone's like, well, what's the creature? Like, don't worry about it. I'm going to shoot it in like 2 months down in my studio. So the people that have watched the episode now that worked on it had no idea what was going to go in there because they weren't around for the shoot. But you know, the fun thing about Creepshow for my studio is every week there's a different monster. You know, you get a werewolf, you get a vampire, you get this otherworldly creature, you get a plant monster, you know, there's a different kind of creature or monster, and the majority of those are practical. You know, I have a group of guys who are ravenous to continue to create monsters and make different monsters for different episodes. So it's kind of like a bunch of kids in a candy store, and you know, I'm the candy maker, I guess.
The Willy Wonka, the I mean, from that to episode 2, Skeletons in the Closet, directed by you, with a story by you and John Esposito. First off, this is just like it hits my horror nerd soul in such a happy way. And is this the most, I guess, like direct love letter to horror from Greg Nicotero that we have seen yet? I mean, I know obviously you fit a lot of like nods into your work, but
It's
this
all
one,
there.
yeah. Is this the
Well, you know,
most personal?
it's very personal. You know, that's hard to say because last season, Model Kid, Public
Right.
Television of the Dead, and Night Living Late Show, those 3 episodes were very personal to me because they sort of told a different part of my existence, whether it was my collaboration with Sam Raimi or my love for monster models, or you know, the game that I used to play with the other guys in the shop. Like, if you could go back in time and be in any movie, what would it be? But you know, given the fact that I'm a collector, a prop collector, and I love movies and I love movie quotes and memorabilia, Skeletons really came about because it's based pretty much on a true story. You know, the fact that after Dawn of the Dead was filmed, there was a skeleton that was used in the movie that was found in a costume shop in Pittsburgh. And they called the coroner, and the coroner's like, this is a real skeleton. And they buried it. They gave it a burial. Like, that all really happened. I always was fascinated with the idea that you could get at one point real skeletons. Like, where did they come from? Whose skeleton was it? Did some guy go out and kill somebody and use their skeleton for a movie? My first job on Day of the Dead, when I got hired by Savini, was to call a medical supply place and order skeletons. And they came from India or somewhere. And I remember just always thinking about wanting to find a story like that. And I thought about it, and I talked about it with a whole bunch of people. And then John and I started talking, and I said, look, I did some research on this skeleton from Dawn of the Dead. And I think that there's a story here. What if we had this crazy fan collector who was so obsessed with props that he went to the cemetery and he dug it up just so that he can have it in his collection? So that's where the idea came from. And then John really ran with it to the point where, we have the Nightmare on Elm Street references, we have Phantasm references, we have movie quotes from everywhere. It's just, most of the stuff in that museum is stuff from my actual collection of props, up to and including my favorite joke, which I'm probably the only one that's going to laugh at it, but the decapitated head of David Warner from The Omen, because while we were writing that head went up for auction, and I actually won. So I actually bought it. And I haven't restored it because that was like the first movie decapitation I ever remember seeing that just blew me away. So when he's like, and she's like, what's the matter? I got outbid. What were you bidding on? David Warner's decapitated head from The Omen. She's like, oh, babe. I laugh so hard every time I hear that line. I called Don Coscarelli too, and I said, hey, man, I'm doing a little Phantasm homage, and I want your permission. I wanted him to know that we were giving this little nod to him. He was super down for it, really excited about it. But, and then, of course, my upbringing of watching Super 8 movies and having a Super 8 Seventh Voyage of Sinbad skeleton fight that I probably played forwards, backwards, sideways, upside down 100,000 times. I really wanted to do the ultimate homage to Ray Harryhausen. We ended up not doing those stop motion, which I would have preferred. It's just there was so many shots that I don't think we would have been able to do it in the time frame. But the VFX company did an amazing job of approximating. I used the same framing and the same shots from Jason and the Argonauts and Seventh Voyage of Sinbad because I wanted it to feel like a Ray Harryhausen sequence.
And Bully, you got to shoot a psycho shower scene,
which was probably one of the most unique experiences that I've had. Because you get to a point where you have to deconstruct every shot. And then you wonder why he did this shot and what piece of equipment he needed to do. And, the most interesting thing was being in there while we were shooting it and seeing the red blood against the white tile and realizing how shocking it was. It was pretty shocking to see how gory it was. So knowing that it was going to be in black and white, if that movie had been shot in color, that scene would have been much more shocking, which is hard to imagine. Hitchcock's psycho shower scene more shocking than it was, but I really loved deconstructing that and looking at every single frame. There was only one shot that we didn't end up doing out of the entire sequence. There was an overhead shot looking down where we saw Marion in the shower and Norman, and it was like from the top. But we weren't able to do that just because we didn't have time. I mean, I shot that whole scene in like 3 hours.
All right. Well said. Thank you, sir. And hey, next time I see you, we'll have to nerd out more about Pittsburgh lore.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to tell you some more stories. Um, Thank you so much for your time, for being so gracious with your time. Courtney, thank you for setting this up. Greg Nicotero, it is a pleasure, and best of luck with everything. I hope to chat with you again sooner than later.
All right.